Hi, this is Mindy Lighthype, and I'm in my studio during the social distancing time. And I just thought that I would take some brief time to just check in and see how you're doing. I hope you're being creative. I hope you're safe. I hope you're feeling really good. And I thought that it also might be good at this time for me to just maybe send you some short videos periodically of just little tips that I think will help you in the studio. Today I'm going to talk about watercolor, and I'm going to talk about all of the tubes of paint that you may have in your repertoire, in your inventory, that are all kind of crusty and not really all doing all that great. And I think that it might be something that, oh dear, I've got to run out and buy some more paint, but the mail system is not all that great and we're not getting things delivered quickly, and what am I going to do? Oh well, I guess I won't paint today. That's not the case. I have a huge range of colors. I've been collecting watercolors probably now for 20 years. So some of my tubes are really old. And I thought that it might be a good little tutorial for you to see how I kind of organize my palette or disorganize my palette, and also just kind of give you an overview of how you can reconstitute your paints so that they're working a lot better for you. So let's go to the other camera, which is overhead, and we'll see kind of the mess that I have and how I can backpedal and make it work so that I don't need to buy anything more. See you soon. Alrighty, here is my palette that I use when I'm going to do very large paintings. And as you can see, it is not crystal clear. There's not an enormous amount of beautiful clear paint, because one of the ways that I paint, which I don't necessarily show when I'm teaching, is that I take little dabs of paint from here and there. So there's a lot of smearing and there's a lot of things that are going on. And this palette actually hasn't been used in a while, so it actually has cat hair and a little dust in it. And if I were going to go and use this palette from scratch, if I just say like, okay, I've got this big project and I want to work with a bunch of colors, I would first take this to the sink. Right now it is very messy, but I also have a lot of pigment that's still left in here, and I really don't want to waste it. It's like pouring money just right down the sink. I think it's important to realize that you can be really messy, but you can also be wasteful. And I don't want to be, I can't help myself but be messy, but at the same time, I really don't want to be wasteful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the sink, and I'm just going to run the water over the top of it, and I'm going to focus on maybe a few wells that are not have a lot of paint in them. So for instance, if you look at this well right here, it doesn't have a lot of color in it. So when I rinse it, this one might come clean. And there might be some others around here that don't have as much paint. The ones that do have a lot of paint, so for instance these, I'm just going to give us a quick splattering across, because I really don't want to waste the paint. And then I'm going to come in with a paper towel. So I'm going to go to the sink, I'm going to kind of wet it down, and then I'm going to come back with the palette still wet, and I'm going to kind of go along and kind of get this palette so that it's a little bit more workable and less of a mess. And I'll be right back. Okay, so I'm back, and I spent some time at the sink, and I don't really have a camera type setup where I could actually hold the camera and do the water and all of the cleaning at the same time. So just to give you a recap, I was at the sink, I just used the regular overhead, and I just began to pour water in here and then turn it and get rid of it. And there's still a lot of water in some of these wells. And if you had too much water, you can always come in. Bounty is one of my favorite paper towels, and you really just can come in and just kind of tap within the well, if you want to get rid of some of the excess water without really getting rid of the paint. So I'm not really taking paint up, but actually this water is not bad to keep in here, because I'm going to reconstitute these colors. And so having the water in there is not a bad idea. But I'm also going to clean out some of these wells so that I have a place for some mixing, and B, a place for some new fresh colors to be put in. If you notice, this is my Hansa Yellow Light, and it was really pretty horribly dirty before. I mostly use it to mix greens, and so as you can see, there's a green tint to it. But I'd like to kind of clean it up a little bit more, so I'm actually going to take the tip of the paper towel, and I'm going to get in here and I'm going to actually press down. And as you can see, there's still a lot of paint in there. I actually probably squirted most of the tube. So that's, you know, I've got a fairly cleaned up yellow so that I really don't need to be squirting any more paint into that well because I can reconstitute it. And then I had a green, which was over here that there was hardly anything in. And so I got most of the paint out, but not all of it. And this way, again, I can come in and clean the well, because if I kept putting more and more and more water on it, I would start to get rid of a lot of the colors that are left here, and I don't want to waste this paint. So as you can see, this well is really ready to go. It's clean. I actually was able to clean this one out fairly well. And there are some others over here, like there's this corner, which is a nice big mixing well, and it's got a big red glob in the middle, I mean the corner here, so I can come in and clean that out. And maybe I would mix purples or different types of reds over in this corner, and I could always clean this out by taking a brush and getting further into that corner to clean it out. And I've also come along the top here and I've gotten rid of a lot of the residue which is on the surface. So as you can see, the palette looks a lot different. Oop, and there's a big glob of cat hair. I don't know about you, but I got a bunch of cats in the house, and they certainly shed. All right, so now I've got a relatively clean palette, and I can, if I have paints that I want to use, I do have some new wells that I can go ahead and add color to. I also have smaller palettes that I do the same thing with, and this is another little palette that I often use, and I've cleaned this one out because I'm going to also make some different mixtures. I'm starting a new painting. And then I also have these little dishes which are single and they stack. So sometimes I will have if I'm going to do a sky, or I'm going to do something where I need a big lot of paint that I know I'm going to be using again and again and again, I will put it in one container, and then I have that container that I can reconstitute and know that I have enough mixed. One of the things that I talked about is your paints. Here is a bucket full of paints, and who knows how long they've been here and what condition they're in. You know, they have a metal, they're kind of in an aluminum or metal, I'm not sure what the material is, but there's something about the casing here. And sometimes the caps are hard to get off, and all different kinds of stuff, and sometimes you start squirting down from the bottom and you get to the top and you haven't used a color in a really long time, and when you go to open it up, there's nothing. I mean, first you can't get the cap off, then when you do get the cap off and you squirt, it's this disgusting globby, there's nothing, it's not even globby, there's just nothing there, it's powder. And you know, you think to yourself, well, that was a big waste of money, and you end up throwing it away. And I'm here to tell you, don't do that. I work with a lot of different manufacturers, and one of my favorites is Daniel Smith. A while back, Daniel Smith had, and this is probably talking 15 or 20 years ago, when they first started, they were promoting their paints by giving you 3 tubes of paint for $15, and that included free shipping. So I accumulated more color than I think I will ever need, because every month they came up with like a triptych, and you would buy 3 tubes of paint. But one of my steady paints that I use very much all the time is ultramarine blue. I use it to mix my greens, and I use it to mix my purples, and this tube is not soft anymore. It was hard to get the cap off, but I did get the cap off, and then when I did, I went and I'm going to just take this smaller palette here, and actually let's get rid of this. I cleaned out a little bit of the well here, but there was a blob of good ultramarine blue paint that was still left behind, and so I just cleaned as much as I could in the sink, and now I have this little dry blob, which is still very viable paint, but maybe I'm going to need more, and so this tube is not going to squirt anything out. Even if I push, I can tell that it's completely dry. So what do you do? Well, let me show you. The first thing that I do is I get a pair of scissors, and these are just cheap little kid scissors. And the first thing I do is I just cut off the end. And sometimes you can actually open this up, and this is a pocket knife, a Swiss Army knife. My dad believed that everyone in the world should have a pocket knife. And every boyfriend that I ever had, he would give them either a Swiss Army knife for Christmas or their birthday or whatever. So there's at least a couple of guys out there that hopefully learned the value of a pocket knife. So right now here, I've got this little knife, and I can come in and I can take some of this paint out so that it's not wasted. So this was at the end of the tube. And now I basically have gotten all of the out of the bottom of that tube, and I can just throw that little piece away. And there's more. So what you could do is you could systematically cut off pieces. And if you're afraid that something's going to happen, you could take a piece of tape. Depending on how much paint you want to get out onto your palette, you could tape this up later on. If you're afraid that it'll crumble or it'll make more of a mess, just take a piece of tape and put it over like that, and then put the cap back on. Not that this is really going to make that big of a difference because it's all dried up, but crumbs might start to get out, and now you've got your tube of paint that is still, it's getting smaller, but there's still a lot of paint in there because I just pushed from the bottom, and there's a ton of paint up in here. So I can come in again and do the same thing. Take my Swiss Army knife. Be careful, you can use an X-Acto blade, you could use a fork, you could use a toothpick, you could use a knitting needle, anything that you can do to get in here. You just open up this, and you can even cut this open if you want now, because you don't have an end, and you'll see that, look at all that paint that's in there. So you can come in and you can scrape that off and put that in there. Okay, so look at that. Found money. I'm just going to take and maybe take your blade and dip it in water, clean off the blade so that there's nothing stuck in there like that, and then close it up, put it to the side. Now, in terms of reconstituting it, I've got clean water, and I like to use little yogurt containers because they fit nicely on the desk. I've got several of them. I'll have like a dirty, a medium, and a clean one. And so for reconstituting, I have an eyedropper, and I like to recycle things. So this is actually from Trader Joe's liquid stevia, and so I've kept this, and I have a little drawer that I keep my supplies in. And so this is one of the eyedroppers. And I'm just going to start by adding maybe 4 or 5 drops. Okay, then you're going to take a brush, and because this well is relatively small, and I'm going to wet the brush first, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to start to move this paint around. A lot of questions that I get, and oops, that just jumped ship, so we'll just put that back in, is how wet or how wet should my paint be, and how much water should I use? And that's kind of a chronic question that people struggle with in their paintings. So one of the things that I will do when I'm starting to do a painting is I would take that big palette that I showed you that I just cleaned, and I would reconstitute every single color in the well, just like I'm doing now. So I'm taking a brush that I don't necessarily care a lot about, and I'm kind of using it to shove this paint around and move it so that it's getting a lot of the moisture in there. I'm going to try and get it so that it's all coming out nice. And I might still have some clumps here and there that I can kind of put over to the side. And if you don't want to waste your paint to clean your brush, what you do is you do what I'm doing here. I'm actually scraping the paint off on the side, and that's getting rid of a lot of the paint that is on the brush. Then I can come into my water and rinse it off. And then a lot of times I will come in with my paper towel and I will look to see if I've gotten the brush clean. Now, let's look at the consistency of the paint that I have here. It's pretty thick, okay? I don't know if you can actually see that, so maybe we'll put it here, and I'll zoom in. See how thick that is? Okay, it's not falling off of the brush. All right, let's water it down. I'm going to put some in the next well here. And you can now see, if you look carefully, that there's not as much coverage on the brush. So this is a very thick consistency here. and I can actually see the white of the porcelain underneath. So that'll give me some kind of an idea. So when I say that it looks like heavy cream, this is what I'm talking about. This consistency is heavy cream. When I talk about skim milk, this is what I'm talking about. If I'm talking about a tea wash, there's a lot of water. And if you think about tea, unless you steep it for a very long period of time, it's very transparent and thin. So you can actually see through it. So here you have tea consistency, heavy cream, and skim milk or milk. All right, so hopefully that will help you. I also have prepared here, I have these little jars. And one of the things that you can do in terms of recycling is that this paint was really crusty. The whole tube was completely terrible, and it's a very granulating pigment. And I put it in this little container that has a lid on it. I have let it sit with some water for quite some time. So one of the things that you can do, if you know that you've got something that you want to work with, and there's a lot of it, so there's actually there's like a big clump down in here, and it would take a lot of work to get it to melt or disintegrate or dissolve into here. But what I did was I placed a lot of water in here and I left it for like an hour, and now it really is workable. Now I have a lot of paint, and this way I haven't lost what was in that crusty, nasty tube. Another thing that you can do, just in terms of recycling and reusing things, is here's a little moisturizer that I use on my face, and I got to the end of it, and I had a color, and I couldn't get the tube to open up properly, and I was really struggling with it, and I started getting angry. So I dumped the whole thing in this little empty jar, and I put some water in here. So now I actually have a lot of paint that if I start coming in here with my brush, look at that, I can just get rid of that. So I've reconstituted because I couldn't get it off the tube. And I don't think I used a Swiss Army knife, so I can't credit my father for that. I just got frustrated and it wasn't coming out the way I wanted it to, and I didn't want to waste the paint. So I just opened it up the best I could and I shoved it in this container, which I knew had a nice lid. There's a lot of paint in here and there's a lot of water. And this has been in here for, oh my goodness, probably a month or more because the lid was really nice and sealed tight. And then there's also still this area here, and you can see, look at how much paint I'm able to salvage. So now I can go ahead and discard this mutilated, what's left of the tube. Alrighty, so I hope that you found this little tip useful now that I've made a mess, but I just think that it's really important. In the days ahead, we don't know exactly what's gonna happen economically, and although getting new art supplies is always a thrill, it's always, then you have a place of like, well, where am I going to put it all and how am I going to store it? And then you end up with a lot of the issues that I just talked about. It's having too much paint and they're not all able to just squeeze from the tube. So I hope that you found these tips useful and that you can get some of the junk that you've got in your closet and pull it out and see if you can get these paints to work. I hope that you will find yourself being more creative and using up some of those supplies. And if you have any questions or you have anything that you'd like to see, please give me a holler and I'll try and make a little video for you. If you'd like, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, or you can go to mindylighthype.com and see more blog posts and also videos, and there's also a YouTube channel. So I hope that you're staying safe, that you're happy, and that you're healthy, and that you're being creative. Oh, and last but not least, I just had to put on my social distancing mask. My friend Becky from Becky Zim made this wonderful mask for me so that when I go out, I am bug protected as well as human protected. So take care and we'll see you. Bye.